Hello and welcome to another episode of the Industry Insight Podcast with me, Chris Nelson. Today, my guest is a well-established and prominent personality in the promotional industry. He's the owner of Ignite Incentives Limited, which is renowned as one of the promotional industry's leading catalogue groups, running successfully for over 15 years and now has 38 distributor members who support and promote the catalogue. Richard and his wife, Collie, are also the owners of Aardvark Promotions Limited, which they've successfully ran for over 29 years. And he's been in the promotional industry now for over 35 years. He's graced us with that. And he has also, in 2017, been awarded the BPMA Personality of the Year. Again, on that note, welcome Richard to the show. And Richard Pettinger, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So Richard, I just wanted to, I know you sort of have an idea again. I think you've listened to a few episodes now, but obviously the idea of this is just to get a bit of a background on of your experience of working in the industry, but also for anyone listening, to maybe just hear about how you've done things and how you've sort of developed to where you are. Obviously,
a little bit of background. As I mentioned earlier, my history and sort of family history is actually in the jewelry trade, where I first started. My father and my grandfather were in that, and I sort of followed them in, pretty much because I didn't really know what to do.
Was that your very first job, by the way, Richard, if you don't mind me asking?
Sorry?
Is that your very first job?
Yeah, apart from being a paper boy, and a brief petrol pump attendant in school holidays and stuff. And I did, my life was very much involved with rugby at that time. And it's before the professional era, so there was no money in it, but I needed a job that gave me Saturdays off. And obviously the retail trade wasn't very good for that, but we did have one shop in Newcastle called Reed's, which was a very old established business, which actually closed on a Saturday afternoon. So I that's the reason why I started there, actually.
So you could play rugby in the afternoon? Is that what you mean? Yeah, I see.
And then I would do a deal with them, for away matches and make up the hours elsewhere. But
what level? I'm asking Richard on that point. Sorry this is me typical digression here, but with your rugby then, what level were you playing at? Not league. That's
relatively high. I played for a club called Gosforth in Newcastle, which has now grown into Newcastle Falcons, which is the professional area. But in the old days, it was known as Gosforth. Massive ramification when professionalism came along, which was not well received by a lot of people in the old-fashioned era. But I captained the second team there for several years and played, first team rugby. I played for Northumberland Colts and under 21. Had an England Colts trial, but didn't get any further on that. Right. And then I just sort of carried on loving the club atmosphere, touring. When I moved to Bristol, I stopped playing for about 2 years, I think, and then joined a club called Clifton, and eventually sort of started a veterans side there, which was largely composed of ex-first class players from Bristol, and various other sides, and we then started touring the world.
Wow. Okay. There's something. Do you feel there's something with rugby and the rugby? You mentioned obviously about the just being a part of that culture. I think it is just it's different to football for sure.
It is actually. It's quite funny. There's still a team ethos there, and I think that very much comes into business actually, and the people that I've been involved with. There is a distinct difference between people who've played team sport and individual sport. If you talk to a golfer or a tennis player, they're very much wrapped up in their individual element. And team players will just fall in line with the other guys. And it might be something simple like, if you're away at a conference or an exhibition, where we're going to eat tonight. So the team players will say, well, I don't mind, I'll go with the flow, whatever. But the individual might say, well, I'm not eating that.
That's true. That, and I personally find that painful because I'm like, well, if we all said that, we would literally be nowhere.
Yeah, I think it follows on in business as well, and it's trust. Particularly in rugby, you put your life in some difficult positions, and you rely on the other guys to look after you.
Yeah, and it's interesting that. I was going to ask you later on, but while we're on it now, we might as well. But do you feel obviously your passion watching rugby and being a part of it and watching it for years on, it has led you to be sort of learn tips from it and think and just
definitely. It's sort of I struggled sort of watching it when I stopped playing for a while. I just I also decided that I needed to give a bit of time back to the family, because it was very much all consuming when the kids were young.
Yeah,
I mean, they say to me now, it's funny, you know, I think my eldest daughter said she was in a sporting situation with lacrosse, I think it was. So, I mean, she just said she smelt wintergreen for the first time, and it took her back to her childhood, you know, and they were in the changing room with me a lot of the time.
Yeah, you got to be careful that windscreen though, Richard. You don't want to be putting it in the wrong places. I used to play rugby. I used to play rugby union, funnily enough, and we're it's rugby league up here, but I randomly found myself playing rugby union. But yeah, not quite to the level you mentioned.
No, well, there's been you do get a few instances where wintergreen is, you know, put places where it shouldn't be. Not a great place, but
so anyway, sorry. Yes, so you've done the rugby.
The whole sort of teamwork ethos is very much, you know, I think the same about Ignite. You know, the distributors we've got in there, also the suppliers, whatever. It's become a big family. You know, a lot of the people in there, they're not just business colleagues; they're good friends as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I rely on them; they rely on me, and you know, it's hopefully it all works out. But
that's funny. I was chatting to Andrew, obviously pre coming up, speaking to you, and he was saying it's funny, like he would certainly class you as a friend inside the industry, outside the industry, just whatever. It's like, it's funny what the sort of family atmosphere comes from with that. It's really nice.
And you know, it's an interesting area, because I have a very good friend who, nothing to do with the promotional industry, who ran a business for many years in the gas industry. Refrigeration gases, and they were the first company to produce non-CFC gases in this country and eventually worldwide. You know, they were in America, Canada, and he built a massive business from scratch with a partner up to a 200-300 million turnover outfit.
Wow.
Sold out recently. He's made a fortune, but he actually said to me, "I will only do business with people I like."
That's it. That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
And he said, "I know pretty much when I meet somebody and I talk to them, do I like this person? Am I going to get on with them? If you get on with them, then the chances are you're going to do good business with them." And I think that's a pretty good ethos to work on. Actually,
that is. I personally, I've always found that. I firstly don't understand why people wouldn't be nice. I mean, you have to speak, or you have to get through a deal or whatever else. So why you would not be nice, I've never really understood that anyway. But I just think it goes a long way. And if you sort of the old speak to people as you'd like to be spoken to type of thing as well.
Well, it is. It's sort of trust, I think, as well. But you know, I used to joke that I built my business in a bar in Düsseldorf.
Well, Andrew actually said it was you classed that the bar in Düsseldorf. He said you classed that as the Ignite office.
It is. It's my European office. Yeah, I have a little bench at the far end of the bar. You know, the landlord there is now a good friend. You know, he's become a great friend over the years. He used to be the manager. He eventually bought the pub. But the amount of people I've met in there, you know, both suppliers and distributors, you know, deals that have been done in there. But it's when you're relaxed and you're talking to people, you know, just in an easy way. And I'd say, you know, I always say I've never browbeaten anyone and never given them the hard sell about Ignite. I usually identify the people that would be of interest, have a chat with them, and just say, you know, where I am. You know, I won't contact you again. I'm not going to talk to you. But if you want to come to us, then fine.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Right. Well, to be honest, I'll actually come back on to that a bit. Sorry, because I was actually interested in something on that specific topic. But just because I am the world's worst for digression, just to go back to, so you were actually in, like I say, you're in the jewelry business. Just to get back from your journey, and what happened then from that point then?
Well, I was with a company which was originally called the Northern Goldsmiths. It's now the Goldsmiths Group. In fact, I think it's now officially known as Watches of Switzerland Group. So it's Watches of Switzerland, Goldsmiths, Mappin and Webb, you know, that's all part of it.
It's Goldsmiths, like literally like you see on the high street, the Goldsmiths jewelers.
Yeah.
Oh, right, so you're right.
So my grandfather started that with another guy called Radcliffe Crossley Cook, and they kicked the thing off back in, I can't remember, 91, but we were actually the first agents for Rolex watches in the UK. Yeah. And I think 1 Blackett Street, which was the head office of the group, was known as Rolex One.
That is cool.
And my father followed on. I went in there, I did 10 years there. So we did 110 years of family involvement. Then I left and set up on my own, which was, you know, my first disaster. So it's very difficult sort of coming out of an enormous group like that to try and fund it. I was persuaded to leave and set up by an accountant
And was it setting up, when you say set up on your own, do you mean set up as you were doing another jewelry business or completely
jewelry
business?
Set up another business with this accountant as a partner who, was a sort of family friend, but anyway, he ditched me, well and truly, and funnily enough, became the partner of the guy I was talking about earlier in the gas business. So, made his fortune elsewhere. At the time, he was partner of a major accountancy firm, but he left them. But anyway, it was a big experience. I learned an awful lot. It, pretty much.
Just picking yourself up and dusting yourself off, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn, and it was a different sort of type of business for me, because I had never been involved in the running of a business. I was very much involved with staff, looking after the shop, selling, but not the finances behind the scene. So all of a sudden, when I look back on it, I was taken away from what I was good at. I spent my time firefighting, looking after the finances, doing it, not really doing what I was good at.
Yeah.
I was also blocked by the goldsmiths from having a lot of the watch agencies that I wanted. I had those set up, and then my old MD basically put the knockers on me. I was quite funny. I wish I still had it now. I had a letter from the managing director of Rolex telling me that they wouldn't deal with me because my previous boss had told them not to deal with me. Which of course now in a court of law would be
it'd be scandal. Yeah.
Anyway, I don't have that letter anymore. Shame, but anyway, that's history.
Okay, all right. So that's to be honest, I can speak about that for a while. That's interesting. But go on. Sorry, yeah.
And I joined. I had another business as well called Dover Street Trophies, which was the original name of Aardvark Promotions, which those long memories in the trade would know. And Dover Street Trophies was a business that was owned by the goldsmiths, which was dealing in sponsored sport, particularly racing. And I bought that business from the goldsmiths when I left. They actually wanted to get rid of it, and it surprised me that they even sold it to me, because I wasn't very popular when I left. And they sold me the business, and that took off quite well and went very well for quite a long time. We were doing the Grand National, Goodwood, a lot of main race courses we were dealing with, and that sort of went off a cliff in the last recession, not the last recession, the recession before the last recession.
Right.
And a lot of our big contracts just stopped. And I, at that point, coincided with the birth of first child. So requirement for money was going that, earnings were doing that.
I do always find that's a weird thing in life. When you need money the most, I feel like, when obviously the birth of a child or anything, I feel like even with the government grants and things like that, they only kick in after about 2 years.
Absolutely.
You think I need them right now, not in like 2 years.
Yeah. I've at the birth of all of our children, I've been in complete shit street, really. And but it sort of, my daughter said to me at a Father's Day lunch last week, why haven't you got any money, Dad? And we've got this. I said, well, I said, you're part of that.
You're to blame for a start. So
it's expensive. You'll learn one day.
To be honest, I'm already learning the hard way already. Yeah, it's I've got 2, so I'm already getting hammered on that quite a bit.
But my introduction of the trade, came very much through another great captain of our promotional industry, George Hayward, and the Page Group, Brian's dad. Right. And I was dealing with the silver trade in terms of my promotional stuff. And I was speaking to a guy who used to work for Arthur Price, the Cutlers in Lichfield, whose name just escapes me now, Bernard Wilkins, who was a really lovely guy. And I was approached by a guy to sell the trophy business because he was wanting, to get into the clients. The one thing we did have was some fantastic clients, but they weren't actually doing the business anymore in terms of the trophy element. They just pulled out of their sponsorship deals. Right. They were great clients. We were doing everything for Prudential, Trafalgar House, Trust House 40, so there was some big hitters in there, Seagram's, and that just stopped. So I spoke to Bernard about the guy who offered to buy me. He just said, "Why do you ask that?" And I said, I don't think you should deal with this guy. Why don't you do it yourself? In terms of getting into the business gift trade. And I said, well, I wouldn't know where to start other than the silver plate stuff. And he said, I can help you out there, and he introduced me to George.
Right. Yes.
And that's when I joined Page, and quite a few of the Ignite members now were in Page at that time. Jeff Sexton, Charlie Parker, Ken Bown, who's Duncan Bown's dad, Brian Rigby. So there were quite a few in there. In fact, some of them are parents of the guys who are now running businesses. Which makes you feel old. And it's. But anyway, George was.
How old were you at this point, Richard? Sorry to ask.
20. About sort of 27, 28, 29, something like that, I think. There or thereabouts.
Yeah.
George was really helpful, and was great. And I always got a lot of time for him. Great character. I get on with Brian now. Brian's one of my competitors, obviously running Page, as is Lawrence at Advantage. But we're all good mates. We get on. We don't stand on each other's toes, and we chat to each other regularly.
I think that's another respect of our industry. Do you not think that that is the case, that people aren't trying? There's enough out there for all of us. It's never been, as far as I've seen it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's marvelous where I get things like Warwick, where you've got a group of guys together who are essentially competitors. Both from distributors but also suppliers, and we all get on like a house on fire. It's great, and the help that everyone's prepared to give. Is wonderful. It is a wonderful trade, actually, full of fantastic people.
Yeah, to be honest, that Warwick, the Warwick event, I think I've got to say I've been in this industry for 7.5 years, and that has got to be at least, it's got to be number one slot on my calendar for it. It's just a great atmosphere, great day. It's just it's really.
It is. It's super. It's so tragic that we couldn't do it last year. We did have a little mini one. The Warwick were given a test event by the government.
Yeah.
And we ended up with about
the same scale.
15 people there, in different sort of boxes, all separated. It went off absolutely fine. But it's become a sort of second home to me, really. I rang the hotel where we normally stay. They were shut, and they said, "Well, we'll open for you." They opened and they said, "But we haven't got any draft beer." And is that a problem? I said, "It's a serious problem." But I said, "Can I bring it with me?" And they said, "How are you going to do that?" And I said, "Well, I've got a brewery down the road, and they sell these things called poly pins, which are sort of boxes with a plastic container inside." Sort of 18 pints, 36 pints, or whatever. He said, "Yeah, that's no problem." And I said, "No, if we organise a carry out to come in, can I rent some plates and cutlery and everything?" "Oh, don't worry, we'll do that. We'll do that for you."
Richard, to be fair, there's lessons there to be learned along with resourcefulness alongside alcohol, and I think you've really nailed it there. The fact that you made that happen. So,
well, it worked really well. It was just a great day, and I think everybody was just so desperate to get out, and just enjoy themselves and meet, colleagues who they just haven't seen for a long time.
Yeah,
and that was great, and of course, people said, "Well, we've got to do it again." Hopefully, we're down for the end of September this year. Fingers crossed. Should be okay. But again, I said that last year, in March, April.
Touch wood. We're hopefully in a better position. But
it's been a dreadful time.
So you were obviously, so you started up the company then, outside when you left the trophy side of the business. And what happened then? How did things get from there to the starting of the Ignite Catalogue? What were the steps?
Well, the steps on that were I was a Page member. And there were, a few problems with certain areas. I won't go into great detail about it, but there was a group of people who started the Promotional Union.
Yes.
And I was one of those. I have to say, at that time, I was a bit naive in the industry. I hadn't been in it that long, and there was one or two guys who arranged a meeting in a pub up at the NEC when the main show used to be at the NEC. And I said, I was asked to go along to this meeting. I said, yeah, okay. And I drove around the NEC for ages trying to find this pub, and I couldn't find it. And I was literally just on the point of going home, and I drove past it. It was, you know what the NEC is like. It's like
exactly. Yeah, I've done that many times.
Anyway, I found this place, went in there, and I just sat quietly and listened, and it progressed gradually. And I think one or two guys spoke to people in the industry and said, would you back this? Would you behind it? And it was a goer. And it started off, the whole ethos of the PU was brilliant, because it was supposed to be everyone had a share, everyone was a director, and everyone was supposed to do their bit. And of course, like communism in a way, it's great on paper, but it doesn't necessarily work if everybody's not pulling the weight.
Yeah,
so there were some pretty vociferous arguments at board meetings. And funnily enough, I remember the big meeting when it all kicked off. I was sitting next to Jamie, who I didn't really know that well. And somebody just proposed me as chairman. And I sat there and thought, bloody hell, there was a bit of a vote, and it was I sort of got it, but I only just got it, and I then sort of said, actually, I don't think that's a good enough vote. If you want me to do this, it needs to be a really good vote. So the vote, and Jamie looked at me and said, I thought you didn't want to do it. I said, well, I don't know, I'll do it. And anyway, I ended up as chairman and ran that for I don't know, I think about 7 years, but I can't really remember the exact timing. And that was good, but God, it was difficult, to chair a board meeting of 21 people, all with their own ideas, and try and get things through with a vote. It was really difficult. And we formed a sort of executive board, which was myself, Duncan Bown, Jeff Sexton, and Brian Rigby. And we effectively ran it, and we got paid. Nobody had been paid before this at all. Right. So we were taking a small salary to actually do all the legwork, and that worked pretty well. But it was all a frustration. We'd sort of have 2 big meetings a year, and it was a question of I would have to wait to this meeting if we wanted to do something. Then you had to get it through on the vote, and it was actually up in Edinburgh where we were printing the catalogue at the time. And we were sitting outside the All Bar One in Great George Street on a beautiful sunny evening with a pint of cider. And sitting there at that table, we hatched up Ignite and said, we want to do this professionally as a proper business.
Properly.
And we then took that individually to all the members of the PU. Several of them came with us. Some of them were really annoyed. There was a lot of, ill feeling towards us about certain things. But what we presented to them was, you're going to get exactly the same thing. You're not going to pay any more than you are currently paying. It will be exactly the same. So we got 90, I would say 98% of the people that we wanted. And 1 or 2 people threw their toys out the pram and said, no, I'm not going to work with you guys. And off they went, which was a great shame. But anyway, the Ignite was born, and I think we were still producing the last catalogue of the PU, which we did and carried through, and then left. And it must have been at least a year before the first Ignite catalogue came out, which was actually produced in Poland, which is again an interesting story. But
we're around about 2006. Is this now? Is that right?
Well,
2006, 2007.
Yeah, 2007. 2006 was when we told them we were leaving. 2007 was when the first one came out. We had this idea, and many years ago, Prodia used to produce a catalogue which was hardback, case-bound book.
Yeah.
And we said, why don't we do that? Because that is not going to be thrown away. It's going to be totally different to any other catalogue on the market. It will be retained, and that has always been our ethos, to produce this hardback. So I then set about finding out where we were going to do this, and I couldn't come up with anyone in this country who was going to give us, an effective price.
Yeah.
And I went to Poland. I can't, for the life of me, remember how I found out about this company, but I made contact with this guy called Rafał Sarowicz, and eventually went out to Poland. And met him, who was a fascinating character, who drove me out to their warehouse, which was a good sort of 2.5 hour drive, maybe 3 hour drive out into the countryside from Warsaw. And I just remember sitting in the front of his car, and he was telling me we were on a long single track road through a forest with trees either side, and those big Pantechnicons charging past us. And he must have been reading my mind, because he said to me, "This is most dangerous road in Poland. A lot of people die here. I drive this road every day. I hate it."
Did you say thank you? That's just the reassuring words I needed. Thank you.
I just remember looking at him thinking, God, if I die here, nobody will know where I am. Or
that's there.
And eventually we turn up at this place, which happened to be an old Daewoo car plant, which was absolutely massive. And they printed, one of their big claims was National Geographic magazine, which they printed for the whole of Europe.
Oh, wow.
And shipped from Poland by lorry all over the country. And they did some big titles. They did a lot of ladies' magazines, Elle and a couple of others that, titles that I recognized straight away, which obviously give you a little bit of peace of mind.
Reassurance.
And we kicked off with them. I think we worked with them for about 2 or 3 years. And then I was approached by a printer over here, and who, funnily enough, were customers of Aardvark. I didn't even realize that in Weston-super-Mare. And we dealt with them. It was owned by a hell of a character called Felix Dennis, who was actually a poet, and was a real character. If you Google him, he's a fascinating bloke. He died a few years back, but he owned this printers in Frome, and I'm trying to remember their name. I can't remember their name, but they've gone now. They're not in business. But I'm now dealing with a sort of follow-up of that era. Although we've been to 2 different printers since then. We worked with this one printer for a long time. I moved away from them last year because they'd made a few cock-ups, not on the printing, but on the binding, which they contracted out, and on the delivery, shipping, just little problems. But
yeah,
I felt I wasn't being loved enough. And so I moved to this new printer who spectacularly went bust in the middle of last year, which turned last year into the nightmare of all nightmares for 2 or 3 different reasons, but that was one of them.
Oh, wow.
And literally, I just paid them as well, quite a substantial sum of money. And I got a phone call from the boss saying, I'm sorry to have to tell you we're going into liquidation. And I said, oh, Christ, when? He said, well, now.
Oh,
I just, put my head in my hands. I thought, oh, my God. And then he said, I'm going to try and help you as much as I can. He said, we have actually printed the pages. They're not bound, they're not cut to size, anything. And I said, well, can I have them? And he said, well, I'll speak to the liquidator, and I don't see why. You've effectively paid for them and more. And we lifted them. I think 3 days later, I sent 2-3 lorries in there to pick them up.
Wow, I didn't even, honestly, Richard, that has completely passed me by. I did not know the Ignite sort of catalogue was going through.
Yeah, well, I didn't shout it from the rooftops at the time.
I'm not surprised. Yeah,
I did actually tell people, later on, but at the time, I just thought, Christ, how am I going to get out of this? And so I then shipped them to a binder funnily enough, in Weston-super-Mare, who I'm going to use again this year. And I had to have all the covers printed separately from a printer in Bristol, which turned out to be really expensive. So it was a big hit in lots of ways. But anyway, we got through it, and you learn even more. So I've gone back to my original printer. I'm still going to use the binders, so we're doing printing, binding separately, you just move on. It's just
that's fascinating.
Life to sort of smack you in the teeth every now and again, which it does.
Yeah, that is to be honest with you, fascinating. So I'm just glad you're touch wood, you're on the other sort of side of that absolute debacle now. Anyway, that's the main thing. So yeah,
it is. I mean, with everything else that was going on last year, that sort of happened in August, September time or whatever, and you just think, just when you think things can't get any worse.
Yeah, what a kick in the teeth.
That's what happens. But anyway, we got through it, and on
that note, obviously, I mean, just while we're touching it, I've tried to. I don't want to go on it too much. I think everyone's very, very bored and tired of COVID in general. But you've obviously, from your perspective in the industry, you as a catalogue group owner, you get to see obviously a different perspective from the suppliers, the distributors, all singing off probably different hymn sheets and with different views. Have you got any tips? You've obviously seen people strive and maybe thrive and maybe not.
Absolutely.
Things you've seen that have been like particularly we've thought, oh, you know what? I can tell you now for a fact. I think when a crisis hits, one wrong thing to do is X, or one right thing to do is X. Is there anything like that?
I think the thing that really hit me was the absolute resilience and speed of people moving on their feet to sell and scrabble around and do whatever they could do. I mean, PPE was obviously one of the big things. We have quite a few members who really did very well last year, and they got stuck into it. I had one guy who's a really good friend and distributor who rang me, and I would say he was pretty much close to tears. He was saying, I'm going to have to make everybody redundant. He said, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And, this is the worst time of my life. And 2 days later, he rang me and he said, well, the good news is all the staff have come to me and said that they'll go on to short hours, so I don't have to get rid of anybody. And then he got contacted by a friend of his who was making sort of laminate sheets or something. I can't remember what sort of business, but he immediately turned that round to start making the face visors. And he was doing them for the NHS. And he said to this guy, you can sell these as well, but if you sell them to the NHS, you must sell them at cost price. You can't make any money on that.
Yeah, that was the horrible thing at the time, wasn't it? When he was he was very concerning that you might have been jeopardized.
I think everybody was going out of their way to make sure they weren't profiteering at other people's misfortune.
Yeah.
And anyway, he turned the thing around, and a month later he said to me, I just had my best month ever. And there's 3 or 4 guys who've just transformed themselves on their feet. They've slimmed down a lot. They've reacted, and they've worked. Touch wood, we haven't lost anybody, and I hope that's going to be the case. I know turnovers have plummeted. Well, in some cases, some have gone up dramatically.
Yeah.
But in most cases, turnover of the entire industry, I would imagine, is probably half or maybe less than half what it was the year before.
Yeah. But your advice really around what that you just said, and that's a fascinating story, by the way. But the advice on that really is that you've personally seen being reactionary is the key, and to not just sit back on your laurels. Or
very much so. And I think communicating with people as well, to know that you're not on your own.
Yeah, reaching out for help or whatever.
I've had so many long chats with people on the phone, where I've been down to my boots, and really distraught. And then I speak to the same guy the following week, and he's down, and I'm trying to pick him up, and he's picked me up the week before.
Yeah.
And that's great, and just, to just keep in contact, to help people as well. Where can I get this? Where can I get that? To move stuff around. And there've been, a lot of inter buying and selling between companies to say, can you help me out? I need, 500,000 hand sanitizers or whatever it is. And
I think that's it. Yeah.
Our contacts in the Far East also helped as well, right at the start, from companies that you might use for something, completely different, from saying, where can I get this? And everybody was moving really quickly. And I think, there was 2 ways of looking at it from my point of view. You've got the guys who've got a big organization with maybe 10, 20, 30 staff, and their responsibility is looking after these guys to try and keep as many as possible, try and keep the whole thing going. And then you've got the much smaller businesses, who might have 2 or 3 people, who were possibly able to go into a little bit of semi-hibernation and say, I've got really low overheads, I'm not buying anything, so therefore I don't have costs. If they've had a pretty successful run in the last few years prior to that, then they've probably got enough flesh to live on.
Didn't need
but,
to. Yeah.
It was a bit of both. But I think the speed and the resilience, the genuine salesman, was coming out. I mean, you look at Jamie, who well, sort of immediately demoted himself and said, I'm going to get in the selling range, and handed over the admin to Ryan and said, you get on with that, I'm going to get out selling it. And he's loved it,
It is, yeah. Do you know, it's so funny. I was saying, I can't remember if I said Jamie or not, but the amount of times I've phoned someone during this period, and it's, it's a director of a company or something, and I'm like, oh, are you okay? What are you doing? Like, sorry, I'm up a ladder in our warehouse. I'll just be too. I'm like, oh. And it is one of those. You've just got to. I think you just have to. Everyone's had to muck in and just do whatever you can and put the sales head back on and whatever else.
No, I think it's been great to see, and all the restaurants and things like these, home deliveries that people have been doing.
Yeah.
Coat at Home, the pasta people, and they've turned the business round, and their packaging, the whole thing is just wonderful the way they've done it.
Yeah.
And I think they've kept themselves going. I think it's very easy just to sort of cry in your boots and think this is dreadful. I'm not going to survive. I know there's loads of tragic stories of people who haven't, and still very difficult, and it's still going to be very difficult for another probably 6 months, I would think.
Definitely, yeah. I heard. I was listening to a podcast, and it was talking about the people, how people adapt basically to situations. They were on about the big distribution chains that go into supermarkets and everything. And obviously, you'll probably remember when it first kicked off and all the shelves were bare and whatever else. And you just mentioned that about packaging and whatever. One of the things that I found interesting, they were on about lean manufacturing and saying that what they basically did in order for, say, flour, a perfect example. So you used to have like 3 different sizes, you know, little tiny bag, the medium bag, whatever else. And rather than saying, oh, well, you tell you what, we need to get, just keep manufacturing the big ones. Oh, we don't need as much of the little ones. We said, no, sod it. Let's just do the medium one. And that's what you get for the time being. And that allowed them to slicken up the whole process. They weren't having to change the cycle on the machine to then go to the next smaller size or anything. And it's just things like that, I think, which have been quite.
Everyone was baking bread, weren't they? It was,
that's true. True.
There was a big shortage of flour. It was like sort of gold dust.
Gardening, baking, or drinking, maybe. I think was the one. I think people just.
Yeah, well, I think I drank less actually.
Yeah, well, it depends if you were working or not. I think was the key on that one. But was.
Don't you say
that? So obviously, so that was COVID. Earlier you spoke about, we just touched on to the fact that you obviously, having the catalogue, you've basically got so many different sort of people coming to you for advice. You've got suppliers wanting to maybe feature certain products. I'm guessing unfortunately, you have situations where distributors maybe say, for God's sakes, please, if you put that supplier in, I'm honestly out of here. Or you've got different opinions on. I'm hoping we've not been in that category anyway. But yeah, so you've got that. Everyone who knows you, I mean, Andrew Williams was like singing the high heavens about this particular point, that you're very even-handed and people know you as that. So is there any advice really in regards to managing people's expectations and managing those situations?
Yeah, it's difficult. I've had lots of complaints that I get. Well, no, I would say lots is wrong, but you do to remember them because they can be quite significant. And it's, it may be a dispute between people, and frequently there can be over tiny little things. And, it's just a question of a little voice of reason sometimes saying, actually, you're in the wrong. Even if that's one of our guys, I'm going to say, if I think they're in the wrong, I'm going to tell them they're in the wrong.
Yeah, because you're a neutral party as well.
And then I would go to the supplier and say, he's in the wrong. And can you help? I mean, he's a good guy. We're a good group. We'd give you a lot of business. It would be nice if you could just sort of try and help out and we'd smooth it over. And normally, if you go to that point, everyone says, "Yeah, of course, we'll sort it out." And I would say that's happened 999.9 times. Once it didn't.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And we went to a meeting with the owner of this business, including Gordon Glenister, who was head honcho at the BPMA at the time, our distributor, and this guy just didn't give in. I think he was completely in the wrong, and I told him so, and he's no longer a supplier of the group.
Wow. So I think that's the problem, is it? When some people you can do all your reasoning and be the intermediary of the decade, and yet sometimes when people have got that absolute head beams just going in one direction, it's like there's not much you can do to change it.
It was a strange situation because I also thought that they were cutting their own nose off, and they obviously felt it was a point of principle. And anyway, it's all forgotten about several years ago. I still speak to them, and see them, but it was just the way it was. I'm never going to hold grudges or. Yeah,
there's no point, is there?
But I will. As Andrew said, I think you've just got to see it as I look upon myself as a sort of neutral, really, and say, tell me the whole story. And, sometimes we all make mistakes in this industry, though. It can be very complicated in terms of artwork sign off and something that somebody's missed. The client misses something that's wrong, and occasionally
there's a lot of pieces in the jigsaw, I think.
And occasionally, I think it's great when everybody can sit down and say, actually, you've made a mistake. We printed it, I mean, I've we had some pens engraved, and they, the actual Andrea, who does all our artwork, always puts a box around the engraving, says guideline, do not print. And this was actually engraved on the pen.
Did it look nice though? That's the main thing.
Well, I mean, I just said at the time, I said, I can't believe you've done this, and they said, well, you signed it off. And I said, well, yes, but it's got on there, do not print. That's showing you where it's going in terms of its position.
Yeah, we did this with we were doing a conflict workshop in Laltex, and they basically had what he did, he blindfolded half the room and put a number 6 on the table, and then the other half of the room opened their eyes and said, right, okay. Then he closed the other half and turned it round to a 9, and they put the blindfolds on, and then he said, right, okay, guys, you're in this half of the room. What number did you see? 6 with 6, and then the other half of the room were going, No, it was definitely a 9. I 100. And the idea is obviously, you've got to before you start barking out like it was definitely a 6. You've got to sometimes step back and think, right, okay, let's look at this entire situation and try and see it from each side and go, yeah, I can see what you're saying there. To be fair, and
compromise is the word.
Yes, in truth, yeah.
And I think it's good to talk, as people say, rather than say I'm not doing this. Just have a chat about things, and most things can be sorted out. It should be the case, but and I think most of the times in our trade it is. I don't think I can't remember too many nasty disputes at all. It's
I can't.
In most cases it's sorry, we'll sort it out. And you hope that when something goes wrong, it's 250 items and not 25,000 items. So.
Yeah, once we just like, I'm gone, I'm walked out. Yeah. All right, so Catalogue Group, and obviously it's been going, obviously really well. You've got now, let's say, 38 members. The obviously we've seen over the last probably 10 years, whatever, the sort of print media trade and side of the world really has changed, and in some point parts reduced. I've said this a million times. I for one cannot help. I'm flicking through a catalogue all day long. I think you can never do what you can do with a catalogue as compared to what you can do on a the websites. You have to wait for each page to load and everything. So I'm for one an advocate, and I don't think they'll ever particularly go, but maybe reduce and maybe things will be done differently. And I was going to say, do you have any plans for Ignite? It's been around, I think we were looking at it, it's 30 to 40 years the catalogue group's been around, but can you see another 34 years?
I wouldn't like to go so far ahead of that. And I mean, we are adapting, and certainly this year, for the last few years, we've done a digital catalogue as well, which is a page turning catalogue. That's become much more relevant. And particularly just at the moment with people working from home, the one thing I am getting from a lot of distributors is we don't know, we haven't got rid of our catalogues because there hasn't been exhibitions, there hasn't been shows, we've not been visiting people. People are reluctant to give out their home address in terms of things being sent to them. So that's a problem. And where the digital catalogue comes in, it doesn't take long to load. It's very quick. We've done a different variation of that this year, just recently, and produced a catalogue with no prices in it at all. And that was aimed principally for 2 or 3 of our distributors said, could they have this for their clients? And it might be either resellers who are selling on, or it's for people selling within their own companies to their staff. So if it's a large organization, and they might have their own range of clothing. So we've done that. We will continue to do that. So we'll do a priced one and a non-priced one, which we'll do with every distributor's cover on them. We offer these other catalogues if people want them for resellers. And the other thing I would like to do and will offer to certain people is if people want a catalogue based on a certain product. So it might just be drinks bottles, or
that's interesting. Sections almost.
Could be just to take a section out. We'll take the page numbers off. We'll redo the artwork and put those in. Those are going to be more expensive, and it's easy for us at the minute. We bought the software to do the whole catalogue a few years back. And sometimes people say to me, well, why are you going ahead and doing a printed catalogue? Well, the reason is we have to have high res images to do it. So the Turning Pages catalogue works on exactly the same print format that we would be using for the catalogue, which is high res imagery to a very high standard. And that to me, it's so much better than a website, for example. People sort of say, I've spoken to my kids and various other people about, what do you think about things like buying clothes on the internet, from ASOS or Next or whoever it might be, Zara. And they say, but I still want to see them either in the flesh or in a catalogue. And I don't know why it is, Dad, but the catalogue looks better. I say, well, I'll tell you why it is, because it's all down to little dots DPI, and whether you're working from high res imagery or are you just working from a sort of medium res PDF, which most websites use. And that's the difference.
The live shots as well, and putting it in a certain environment and things like that. There's even things like that you could, the next.
We try and we always ask for that if possible. I want, I go through people's catalogues. I want the lifestyle images, and they say, well, we haven't got that. So, well, can you get it? Somebody must have it. It's, it was produced in the catalogue. So if I've got a flashing light on the back of a bike or something, let's show the bike, in the dark, if we can do that.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
So we're very particular about our imagery, and we'll photograph stuff that's not good enough, which we don't charge anybody for. So a lot of it amazes me that some suppliers don't have really good images, and we're absolutely anal about that, and because we use colored backgrounds, we have to cut everything out in detail. So I think a lot of people don't actually quite realize how much work and attention goes into that, like the insides of key rings, the inside of a handle on a bag or whatever, that's all got to be cut out to make it look good.
Well, you know what, that in itself, this whole thing, the live shots and everything else, and I think something in terms of the longevity of the catalog, do you think just being relevant is important? I mean, you obviously mentioned, the PSI, going to PSI and whatever. I know you've been over to China in the past and things like that. Do you think just basically having a finger on the pulse of the industry is important for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I call it. I mean, it's a bit of a. People might think it's a little bit of a con, when you say, well, why are you going to Hong Kong? I mean, you mentioned on the questions about PCM and the pen company I was involved with. Well, I did have a genuine reason for going there all the time, and since that I've still gone out several times. Yes, I enjoy it, I won't deny that, but it does give you an industry trend moment, certainly. And to go to the Hong Kong fair, you walk around hoping for that ping moment when you see something that is not here, and damn well that will be all over this country 18 months down the line from then, and the Chinese will copy anything that's going. I remember going on the Pro Deer stand when they had just produced a brand new pen. They don't do it anymore now, but anyway, it was on there, and the guy said to me, we're so proud of this. This is absolutely fantastic. It's unique. I said, yeah, I've just seen it. And he said, you can't have done, we've just produced it. I said, no, it must be something else. Actually, I had seen it round the corner, so it had already been copied, and it hadn't even got into Europe at that stage. But I think industry trends are something that you see. You see what other people are doing. It was fascinating to walk around. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff that you just don't need. I'm not interested in Christmas baubles and Christmas decorations and stuff. It's enormous, but I've not been to Hong Kong now for 3 years, I think. And the last time I went there, I went out to China as well. I went to Juniper's factory with Andrew. And, that was fascinating seeing what they're doing as well. Yeah. But, it was, interesting to see then that about how business was suffering in China at that point. That was pre-COVID. Right. And there were a lot of empty factories, places closing down, and not so many containers on the dock. We always used to say when we were traveling in from the airport to the center of town, you can judge how business is going by how many containers are on the dock. And you go past these container yards, and they're absolutely stacked mountainously high, or they're not. You think, that's interesting. It's and of course, over the years, it's been fascinating.
I'm missing something. Is that because of why was the trade failing pre-COVID? Was this because of the tariffs from America, or what was the?
I think we were in. I think people forget we were in a little bit of a recession, really, at that point, and Chinese wages were going up, and a lot of. Every time they have Chinese New Year, these guys who work in the factories go back home, which might be a long way across China, and frequently they don't come back again. Because they're all in dormitories living on site at the factories. But occasionally they'll just go, and if somebody's offering them another couple of dollars a month, they'll take it. So it's always a battle, but it was a time and a place, very interesting, fascinating, but again, to see what's in. Hong Kong's a great place. You either like it or hate it. It's in your face all the time. But I love it. I couldn't possibly live there. But
I found that most busy cities. I don't think I'd like to actually. Maybe if I did live there, maybe a year or something, but no longer. But I was saying that I don't think I'd be able to explain that to my wife now. To be fair, I don't think she'd.
A week nearly killed me. A year.
So I mean, it's one that I need to find. I definitely need to. PSI is the one I'd love to just get out there and even just because I can't believe I've never actually done that.
PSI I think is great. It's a really good show. It's very well attended by both exhibitors and distributors going around.
Yeah.
Very much a European show, but the big guys are there. Although a lot of them haven't been the last couple of times. It's definitely smaller than it was a few years ago. But it's a great vibe. It's a great social visit, I think. I remember I think the first or the second time I went out there, the Irish bar, as I was mentioning before, was absolutely packed with the Brits from our industry, all of them. And I just remember somebody saying, if the roof caves in here tonight, half the promotional industry in the UK will be wiped out. And everybody was there.
That bar. That's why I want to. That's like my aspiration, to just get to that bar and get myself.
And the pubs. The pub has two massive weeks in the year. One is PSI and the other is a medical conference. And there's apparently a load of Australian doctors who use that as their base, and that is the two best weeks of the year.
Yeah, wow.
But I hope it goes ahead in January, and it's a great trip. But it's also a super time of the year. January's a pretty miserable month, and it's
all buzzing and alive, and
it's just a sort of pick me up after Christmas and New Year, when you think, the nights are dark and it's cold and miserable, and you've just been through the high of Christmas, and then you come crashing down. You think, oh great, we're going to PSI.
Yeah. No, that's it. Well, on that note alone, I'm gonna push for it next year, to be honest.
Yeah, no, you should. I'll look after you, don't worry.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Yes, I always need a chaperone, Spanish. So if anyone can help me with that, that'd be amazing. We're just to get sort of with the Ignite Catalogue. Obviously, you bring. I've always tried to touch on when we do the podcast is like non-negotiables, really. But I just wanted to see, as an Ignite member, you have hinted earlier about you have the conversation with someone if you feel it's right. But is there anything where you would say it's a non-negotiable about coming on board with Ignite, or something you would say that you actually really look for in someone? Is there anything like that?
I think I'd probably rather tell you what I'm looking for rather than what I'm not looking for.
Okay.
And I think the chances are, if there are people, when we first started, I had a target list of people that I went after. We issued a sort of press release and a document to the whole industry, to sort of say, come and join us. And it was quite comical, actually, because we printed a little sort of leaflet, telling us what was going on. And inside that, we put a mouse mat in, a bright mat. And the bright mat, I think, was quite new at the time. We printed all the details on the mouse mat, because I thought, well, let's use our own industry to promote ourselves. And we put everything on there, what the deal was, how much the catalogues were, the whole lot on this bright mat, sent it out with another leaflet, whatever. One of the first conversations I had with someone who rang up, it was, I really like this mouse mat. Where did you get it?
Yes, I think you're missing the point, but thank you. I
thought, I'll just cross them off. But no, we had sort of, I went looking for, I spoke to you guys, suppliers, saying, who's the best distributor in Edinburgh? Who's the best distributor in Glasgow? Who's the best one in Newcastle? Who's the best one in Birmingham? Who's the best one in London?
Yeah.
And I just went to them, and I thought, and I would wait, because if one was saying, actually, I'd love to join you, but I've said I'm going to stay with this company this year, so I said, that's fine, we'll wait. You are our target for this area, so I won't take anyone else. And I didn't, and we stuck with that. So I've always, I need high integrity. I need a company that's been trading for several years. I learned that by mistake. And I need someone who's got respect within the industry already, a company. And I do a little phone around and chit chat to half a dozen suppliers, and people saying, tell me about this person, what do you know about them, what about the business, whatever. Nothing in writing, so nobody's going to be, held in court or whatever. And just to get a feel, I pretty much know, it's a bit of gut instinct, really.
Yeah.
And for me, the whole purpose was to give you guys the business. So if I get the right people on board, you are going to want to support me because we're giving you the business. And that's really the ethos of the thing. I don't want anyone to come in the catalogue and not sell their stuff. So if somebody comes to me and says, oh, we put this item in the catalogue and it's not selling, I'll say, well, let's sit down and work out why. Have you contacted people? Have you done this? Have you done that? And let's see what we can do to, boost it. I know sometimes it doesn't work, but very, very rarely.
But it's important, obviously, because you've got, as you say, you've got to make sure you make sort of right choice from a political perspective as well to make sure.
It's a partnership. You know, I don't want to be sitting there saying I want you to pay to come in the catalogue. You know, I want you to benefit from coming in the catalogue.
And everyone involved as well.
You know, if you don't benefit, there's no point in being there. You know, you're not there for fun. You know, we are actually in the business to make money. And you know, I want that. But if I've got the right distributors on board, then people are going to be happy. You know, and you know, that's been the case so far. So long may it continue.
Cool. So Richard, thank you about it. I've some fascinating stuff in the middle of all that, and I think some great piece of advice as well. I was going to ask you, Richard, as I said before, I'm going to very carefully word this next question. You obviously, as I've mentioned a few times now, you're obviously, you know, long-standing in the industry and everything else, and you know, successfully done really well with Ignite and everything else. Have you, in the, you know, the distant future, obviously, have you thought of any plans for you know, winding things down? Have you got any plans for your kids to get on board? Have they mentioned anything, or have you?
Well, I'm still waiting for Camelot to pay me my pension, but they keep getting the numbers wrong every week for some reason. But no, I mean, I've often said.
I went over my head a little bit for a second there. Sorry, it took me a while. I'm a bit slow.
My idea of retirement would be to have Monday and Friday off, really. I sort of think I don't know is the answer to that. I don't have any plans to retire. I'm not intending to do anything different for years to come. Circumstances may change that, you know, who knows. But you know, if everybody suddenly turned around and said not doing this anymore, then you know, then I would need to reinvent myself. But even then, I can't imagine retire. I don't understand retirement. You know, I mean, I would have to be doing something. So
I've always said
I was out washing cars or doing some gardening or whatever. I would be doing something. I can't just sort of sit here and do nothing. And I would invest in another business of some sort. You know, it's I mean, my daughter is a lingerie designer. You know, and I've been.
I think you'd be a model, are you, Richard? That'd be odd.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I might fail in that element. But you know, she talked about having her own business. That's not happened yet. Maybe will, maybe won't. I don't know. I thought my son might come into this business. He is actually doing a bit of work for me now.
Oh, right, okay.
He is actually a pricing analyst with a similar sort of company to our business, not in our business, but in the catering world. And he works on spreadsheets all day, you know, doing catalogue pricing around the world. Right. So he's teaching me an awful lot about spreadsheets, and he's doing, you know, quite a bit of work for me in the background. He's got a bit of a knowledge of the industry. He's looked after the business a few times when we've been on holiday. So he knows a bit of the suppliers. He's come to a couple of industry events. And I don't think he'll come in there, but I don't know. You know,
what's the space? You never know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I'd love the thing to continue. You know, if it's not me, then maybe it's someone else. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. You know, it's.
Okay. Well, you're far too young to be thinking about that anyway, Richard. So, you know.
Oh, thank you.
Right. Okay. Cool. Right. So, I'm just going to ask you quickly: is there any particular, after all years in the industry, in life, really, I suppose, is there any particular bits of advice that you've ever been given that have sort of stuck with you? You've probably, I think, it might be wrong. I think you've skirted over a lot of what you've said is important and way to be. But is there anything particular you've heard that? Yeah,
I think one of the great things that was said to me many years ago by a guy, so never dwell on anything that's gone wrong. He said, you know, if you lose a piece of business, and he likened it to a muddy field. You know, he said, if you're in the SH1, go through the gate into the fresh green grass on the other field, start again. You know, and if you lose something, then, you know, fine. Don't harp on about it. You know, just say, oh God, I've lost that business. I've got, you know, just pick yourself up, get on and go out for the next one. I think that's very important. And sometimes, and the other thing is when things are bad, and you get into bed at night and you turn the light off and your head's on the pillow and all you can do is think, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And your mind's racing or whatever. Just say to yourself, I can do nothing about it until the morning.
Oh, I think I could definitely do that sometimes.
And you just can't do that, you know, and nothing's going to happen. And you tend to think when in the times of, you know, absolute dire depression or things going wrong, whatever, that it's all going to end the following day. Well, it's not, you know, because the sun's going to come up, the lights are going to go on.
Yeah, the world will keep on spinning.
It will not end. It'll just carry on. And, you know, I've been in those situations a couple of times. And lo and behold, it doesn't happen. And the third one, decision making. When people say to you, right, I've got to do that, and it's usually when you're parked in a corner and something's wrong, and you say, right, I've got to either do that or I've either got to do that. I think this was the same guy actually, and he said to me, "Oh, you've missed out on one of those decisions." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Do nothing." And he said, "I think you'll probably find that's the best decision." And I don't mean that in terms of do nothing ever, but just think about it, stand back and say, actually, no, I'm not going to make that decision. And it's usually when people might be trying to sell you something. Oh, you've got to decide, if you don't book this hotel room now, it won't be there tomorrow. If you don't buy this house now, it won't be there tomorrow. And actually just say, no, just a minute, I'm just going to think about that for a while. I've generally found that doing nothing is the best decision.
I'm genuinely absolutely, there are three cracking bits of advice. So thank you for them, Richard. They're really good. So last ultimate question we've got for you is, again, always the big hard hitter to finish with. I was going to ask you, desert island film, Richard, if you do have one. And if you,
I'm not allowed to say one. I've been told you can't say that.
Right, okay.
So I would say Shawshank Redemption, which fantastic. I remember my kids going on at me about that, saying, "You've got to watch this, you've got to watch this." And I did have a couple of attempts at watching it, and for some reason it was always on late at night, and I either fell asleep or didn't do it. And the first time I watched it all the way through, it is a fantastic film.
Unbelievable.
And also I'm a great Bond fan. All the Bond movies. I love the music, the scale of it, the whole thing. I know it's all sort of fantasy and whatever, but it is, that's a great a great franchise. Which
can we tell you a Bond joke?
Yeah.
So Sean Connery, he comes into my house. He's doing a bit of DIY, and I say to him, "If you don't mind, thank you for coming by, Sean. If you can just put up those shelves in the back there, that'd be great." And he puts up the shelves, does the hammer work and everything. And I'm like, "Oh, quick!" And he says, "Yeah, well, I'm quick at doing these things. It's fine." And I say, "All right, well." Next thing, the whole shelving unit falls down, all and smashed everywhere. Everything's all over the place. And he just puts his hands in his head and says, "Oh, I'm ashamed of myself." Sorry, that's as good as I've got that.
Oh, very good accent. Very good accent.
Sorry, I'm just terrible. So that was it. Shawshank, and then the Bonds as well. Yeah, no, they're great films. I'm not sure.
So that I mean, it's funny you were talking about the Lions in South Africa. And,
yes, I do. Sorry, Richard. Yeah, I did want no.
I would love to have gone. I've done all 3 Lions tours: South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia. South Africa is definitely the best. I was hoping to go. I wouldn't go now in the current situation. I was really hoping that they were going to postpone it until next year, and that would have been my final sort of.
When is it, Richard? Is it
starting on Saturday? With the first time they're playing a home game against Japan at Murrayfield in Edinburgh on Saturday, and then they will fly out next week. And it's it will be going on for, I think it's 6 weeks probably or something, the whole thing. But I mean, South Africa is a great place to play rugby. We toured out there with our vet side. And it's just a massive thing to them. They're the nearest thing to this country in terms of how they think about rugby. Great country, bloody hard people, hard rugby. Let's play hard, and have a good time afterwards. And
what did you
great time out there. We took our own referee with us, a guy called Ed Morrison, but he had actually refereed the World Cup final the year before, and it was the year that South Africa won it. And Mandela was, it was very much his world. And, Ed came out with us. He lost his job. Referees were amateur at that time, and he gave up his job at British Aerospace to go and referee out in South Africa. He got the top job, so he got the final. He met Mandela the night before, and Mandela shook his hand and said to him, "Tell me, Mr. Morrison, who is going to win tomorrow?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, it will be the best side." And he said, "Tell me, Mr. Morrison, who is going to win tomorrow?" And he said 3 times he asked that question with a glint in his eye and walked on. And when we went out there the following year on a tour, played 4 games out there. And when we arrived at the airport, we were walking across the apron to where the cars were outside Cape Town Airport. And all the taxi drivers got out of their car and came over to shake Ed's hand. And he just looked at me. He's such a humble guy. He looked at me and he said, "Rich, I'm famous." And I said, Ed, you are, and it was, we were The last game we played out there against a side called Villagers, which is one of the oldest sides in Cape Town, the two top South African international referees came to run the line. So we had Ed Morrison, World Cup reffing, and these two international refs as linesmen. And the guys watching, you know, the guys we were playing against as well, they said, Jesus, who are you guys? So it was a great trip.
What I was asking for, sorry, Richard, what position did you play?
Prop,
right?
Front row. Yeah.
Funnily enough, Richard, you wouldn't think I used to be a hooker. Well, that sounds very strange, but yes, I did used to be a hooker.
And where did you play?
I used to play for exactly. Old one.
Well, actually, somebody sent me a clip recently about what's he called, Tom Youngs, the Leicester hooker, and it was from an American paper, and they referred to him as Leicester's prostitute.
They've gone into Google on synonyms. What's the word for hooker?
Bloody brilliant.
Oh, Richard, right, on that note, I'm going to wrap it up and just say, honestly, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest. It's been really fascinating. I think you've got some great stories, you know, people you've met over the years, and I think there's some great piece of advice in there as well. And I hope it's for anyone listening, it's been useful. So yeah, thank you so much again. Thank you, Collie, as well, for listening. I'm sure you've heard some of these stories before, so if you're listening in there, thank you.
Could I just finish, obviously thanking you and Laltex Group, you know, who have been great supporters of Ignite all the way through. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of our suppliers in the industry. You know, we can't do anything without them. They support us. They've been great. And thank you to all my distributor friends who keep me going. You know, long may they continue to order catalogues and stay with us, which would be great.
It's great industry, and I'm sure they will, Richard. So yeah, thank you again. Right, on that note, I will say goodbye, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Industry Insights podcast. Thank you, Richard, and yeah, goodbye until next time.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye.